My parents had only two children, my sister, who is 22, and me, a 22-year-old female. From the day my sister was born, I seemed to become almost invisible. She was the child everyone was drawn to, the one everyone wanted to play with. In contrast, I was more withdrawn and antisocial, preferring my own space even from a young age. My sister always received what she wanted, while I had to make do with what my parents felt I needed. I rarely approached them for anything, but whenever I did, I was often met with a negative response. This disparity slowly fostered a sense of dislike towards my sister. We were vastly different from each other. In high school, I was the nerd, while she was the popular kid. Many people found it hard to believe that we were related, and she even admitted that I embarrassed her, which hurt me deeply. My sister had no trouble making friends or socializing in new environments, whereas I needed time to get comfortable. I was less likely to initiate conversations, and although I had talents, my shyness meant that only a few close friends were aware of them. One of my few close friends was a 27-year-old male who, like me, was socially awkward. He always assured me that I was an amazing person. Unlike me, he didn't have personality issues because his parents adored him. I, on the other hand, was always anxious and found it hard to trust people. I feared that others would treat me the same way my family did, not seeing me for who I truly was. My formative years were tough, and my best friend was my only voice of reason. Had we been older, he might have known how to help me better. Growing up as a teenager with an identity crisis and evolving into an adult was a recipe for disaster. Looking back, I cringe at the things I did to get attention and please people. Things that were the complete opposite of who I was and what I stood for. My discomfort in my own skin led me to act out in ways that weren't true to myself. Meanwhile, my sister continued to flourish and remain the golden child. At the time, I didn't think my parents were aware of how their actions affected me, but I still blamed them for not being there for me. It seems like no one noticed that something was wrong with me because they were too engrossed in my sister. As the years passed, my sister and I grew further apart. It's obvious why we weren't close. I was angry at my parents and jealous of her. I felt she should have noticed the imbalance and done something about it, like redirecting some attention towards me, or at least talking to our parents. Instead, she reveled in the attention and even laughed at me with her friends. However, my nerdiness ultimately worked in my favor. I earned a full ride scholarship and excelled in both my academic and professional careers. Last year, the golden child, my sister, got married. You can imagine my parents paid for everything, including her honeymoon. My mom explained that they were going all out for my sister's wedding because they were worried I wouldn't get married. So if this was the only wedding they would have, they wanted it to be extravagant. Surprisingly, that didn't hurt me because I had a boyfriend before, but I wasn't ready for marriage or any relationship. I needed to fix myself first and learn to love myself because I realized I couldn't love someone else if I didn't love myself. I couldn't truly know and care for someone if I didn't know and care for myself. After I succeeded in that personal journey, I met my fiancé. When I shared my story with him, he seemed to love me even more despite all the mistakes I made trying to fit in. I love him with all my heart and am thankful to him for showing me what love is and how to love. He helped me come out of my shell. And now I don't hold back with him on anything. I know who I am, and I love myself. When I got engaged, I went to my parents' house to share the news. They didn't seem as excited as they were for my sister, but that no longer bothered me. They congratulated me, but mentioned that they had spent all their money on my sister's wedding last year and couldn't contribute to mine. They also said they didn't know I was in a serious relationship. That was when I snapped, but I said nothing to them. I no longer believe they didn't know they were hurting me because they did this repeatedly and expected me to understand. When I got home, I tore up the invitation cards I had reserved for them and my sister. When they later asked for the wedding date and venue, I changed the subject. I think my sister saw my wedding details on social media and informed my parents. They were furious that they didn't know my wedding date or that they weren't even invited. I replied that space was limited, so only the most important people were invited. That worsened the situation, but I was just being brutally honest. I didn't consider them the most important people in my life, and the wedding was a small one, so I wanted to have the most important people around me. If I'm being brutally honest, I also wanted to spite them. I didn't care that they were angry at me. It wouldn't be the first time. But they didn't seem to let this one slide. My mom and sister found my new house, where I had moved in with my husband, and came to scold call it that because I don't think they intended to have a civil conversation. All they did was scream at me. So I asked them to leave and not come back unless they were willing to behave like civilized human beings. I left them and went to my room, locking the door behind me. A few hours later, I came out and found that they had met my husband. He asked them to wait for me, which upset me because I didn't want to talk to them at all. I knew he did it because he always wanted me to reconcile with my family. He believed that if I could do that, I would heal completely. He also didn't like how distressed I became whenever my family came up. So he wanted me to be comfortable and truly happy. I understood his intentions, but I was being stubborn. My mom started to scold me again, and then my husband stepped in and cautioned her. He told her that the only reason he asked them to stay was because he knew it was the right thing to do. However, if she didn't behave properly, she and my sister would have to leave, and he wouldn't try to get us to talk again. My mom knew he wasn't joking, so she calmed down. I told them that if they really wanted to talk, the whole family had to be present, and since Dad was missing, we would either wait for him or speak at a later time. They left because Dad couldn't make it that day. They returned during the weekend, this time with my dad. He was more disappointed than angry that he didn't attend my wedding. I told him that he had no right to be disappointed because he was never there for me. They always neglected me and made me feel like there was something wrong with me, while my younger sister was the standard. I always had to sacrifice for her. They had no idea how much that affected me. I struggled so much and was anxious all the time. I didn't know how to speak up for myself or have a mind of my own because I thought I shouldn't have a say. They also taught my sister to treat me badly, and they never corrected her. This was confirmed at her wedding, which they paid for in full, and Mom even commented that they did that because they were not sure I was going to get married. They were always insensitive to my feelings and made me feel like I didn't deserve to be a part of the family. It wasn't just my sister's wedding, but how they treated me since she was born. At some point, I craved their attention, but I never got it because my sister had all of it. I gave him specific instances of how they treated me differently and how it made me feel. All of that contributed to them not being invited to my wedding. I didn't think I needed people who constantly caused me pain on one of the happiest days of my life. I also let my sister know how I felt about her and the way she treated me. They felt ashamed and apologized. My sister admitted that she treated me that way because she was jealous of me. I was stunned. What could she possibly have to be jealous of? She said she wasn't as smart and I always did well at school. Because we weren't close, she didn't know how to ask me for help. And it made her mad, so she treated me badly. That was news to me, because I would have gladly helped her, even if it was just to cultivate a healthy relationship. We all cried and made up. My husband was so glad after they left. He told me that I was finally free of hurt and pain, and now I could truly live. He said, "Your parents didn't do well for you at all. I'm happy they didn't attend your wedding because if they had, you probably wouldn't have had the opportunity to tell them how you actually felt. You and your sister sure made some mistakes. Even if your parents were being unfair, you and your sister should have found a way out. She was jealous of you, and you were jealous of her. It seems to me that simple communication would have solved the problem that hurt both of you for years. Now, let me share another story. I'm a 16-year-old girl, and my mom died of cancer. My dad got remarried to another woman, and they ended up having more kids. It has been really hard on me, but I've tried. And I'm still trying to be supportive. I understand he can replace his wife because people do that all the time. But I can't replace my mom. I'm not going to lie. It was very difficult to see her in my mom's bed, and using the cups my mom drank from. Even though it's been a few years, it still hurts my feelings when she participates in traditions my mom had with us. I personally don't think she has the right, but I also don't like celebrating any of her traditions or going to see her family, which makes it hard. I don't say anything about these things because what's the point? My dad's whole personality is different since he married her and had more kids. I've accepted that I don't have my dad either and have a countdown app on my phone for when I turn 18, so it feels like there is an end in sight. My dad and his wife are not abusive in any way, but I still prefer to go elsewhere and don't consider myself part of the family. I'm slowly coming to terms with the fact that my dad did replace my mom and me, but that's okay, because he still loves me. It makes me really depressed to be around their kids. Siblings go through things together, and the worst things that have happened to me are things they don't know about. My mom dying, my dad changing, and my dad getting remarried. I told my dad and his wife that I would be very uncomfortable if the kids they had together grew up not knowing that I had a mom who died. That was my deal breaker. I call my stepmom by her first name, and my half-brother asked why I don't call her mom. My half-sister chimed in, saying, "Yeah, she's your mom." When I told them that my mom was dead and their mom isn't my mom, my stepmom explained it to them again. I understand that they are young, but they have been told so many times. I ended up just leaving and driving to my grandma's, my mom's mom, and texted my dad that I would be there. My dad and his wife kept calling and texting, but I just turned off my phone and took a nap. My dad ended up coming to my grandma's, but I refused to see him. My stepmom stopped by today too, so now I would like to know if I am being in a hole. I would like to tell my dad that he failed as a dad and a husband because he still is my dad and will always be my mom's husband. I also want to tell my stepmom that her presence makes me depressed, but that would make me in a hole. Reading all of your replies, it seems you think I'm a bitter child and that therapy is not helping me. My stepmom and my father can't win with me regardless of what they try. You've openly said this. You want your stepmom to admit she only has her family because your mom died. Kid, she knows this already. I get you're hurting, but you're being in a hole. You also can't be angry that your dad hasn't asked to sit in at a therapy session with you when you've never asked him to. He would probably say yes and come with you, or maybe just a little understandable. YTA. I see nothing your dad or stepmom have done to be ta. Siblings do not share all experiences and pain even with two parents, so don't write off the little ones. You've been dealt a tough hand, but it seems like they care for you. Therapy might help you look at things from others' perspectives a bit more. Next story, I know the title seems bad, and it probably is, but I don't know what else to do. My wife, 28, and I, 33, have two children, A, our 2-year-old daughter, and B, our son, whom we both love more than anything. Last year, I found out I also have another daughter, C, who is 13 years old. Her mother never told me about her. I don't blame her. Ours was just a weak relationship, and she lived in another town. She went back to her hometown before finding out she was pregnant and decided it was best to raise the child by herself. 5 years ago, I met my wife and fell in love with her on the spot. I know it sounds like a cliché, but it's true. I would give my life for her in a heartbeat. We found out about my other daughter a year ago, and she is now 13. Honestly, I tried so hard to love her like I love my other two kids, but I can't. My wife wasn't too happy about having a stepdaughter out of the blue, but she acted gracefully and never stopped me from having a relationship with her. C came to our house a few times, but she always argued with my kids. Normally, I wouldn't think much of it because even when they meet their cousins, one minute they argue, and the next, they're inseparable. But C is the one who mostly starts everything. As a family, we love spending weekend evenings watching movies together on the sofa. C constantly complains that the movies are for small children and that she hates them. She makes comments like this character will die, or this character is stupid, causing my younger daughter to cry and cuddle with me, which only makes C more awful to her. C has destroyed many dolls, saying that she didn't get to have dolls, so why should A and B have them? Her mom was barely making ends meet, while we are pretty wealthy. And yes, I pay child support and have paid for the years I didn't know about her. Many comments and actions have made my wife pretty angry, and she told me that unless C goes to therapy, she is not allowed around our kids again. If C comes to the house, my wife will take our kids and go to her mom's for the days C stays here. This is the part that will make me seem like in a hole. I don't love C. I don't like spending time with her. And I definitely don't want to lose my family for her. I know it sounds awful. And I've really tried hard to feel differently, but I can't. I told her mom about the therapy, and she started accusing my wife, saying she just wants to destroy my relationship with C and that she's an awful stepmother. I told her that if she won't put C in therapy, I'm no longer willing to put up with her and won't risk losing my family for her. She called me a lot of names, said I'm in a hole, and asked how I could put my wife over C. Some have suggested getting a paternity test and questioned the backdated child support. This situation is hard for everyone, and forming a relationship with all the negativity surrounding the interactions is a struggle. Why not cut back? Why not take C for a milkshake and a chat? Hang out at a library? Or take her to a movie she likes? She won't be competing with the younger children, and your other kids are young enough to accept this with no major issues. You can form a relationship with your daughter without causing burdens for your wife. I feel for C. She sounds intolerable, but she's also suffering and struggling. Why her mother thinks she doesn't need therapy is beyond me. I think you're trying super hard in an awful circumstance. Maybe some therapy for yourself too. Keep going, Dad.